Chapayev and Pustota, or Buddha's Little Finger, as it's known in the West, is the first Zen novel in the world literature, where actions takes place in absolute void. It is probably the main Russian novel of the 90s, unexpectedly linking these years with a much more adventurous historical era. This is the book after which Russians believed that Pelevin would come and explain everything. The obsession continues to this day. The decadent poet Pyotr Pustota, Pustota in Russian means void or emptiness, moves between two worlds. In one, he fights on the fronts of Russian civil war, along with Vasily Chapayev, who on the one side is legendary division commander and famous hero of jokes, and on other he is enlightened Eastern sage. In another dimension, Pyotr is a patient in a mental hospital whom they are trying to bring back to reality from the world of obsessive fantasies. In Pelevin's postmodernist multiverse, jokes, blockbusters and pop culture turns out to be a reflection of ancient archetypes, and the reality of 90s is declared an illusion, a product of the restless human mind. Buddha's Little Finger makes Pelevin one of the first writers of post-Soviet Russia and give him a reader's trust for decades to come, allowing year after year to apply the same method to current news, social trends and technological innovations. It was written in the mid-90s, between the armed conflict at the White House, which is indirectly mentioned in the novel, and the presidential elections of 1996, clearly influenced Pelevin's next book, Generation P. By the time Pelevin was already known in various circles, from science fiction fans to critics who follow literary novelties. The attention to modern prose, however, is no longer as high as in the last years of the USSR. Life is changing too quickly. The reading intelligent part of society is losing economic support. The true reality now consists of gang wars, commercial stalls, a Latin American TV series, the First Chechen War. The writer is no longer a star or a spiritual leader. Armed with techniques from esotericism and postmodernism, Pelevin will regain this status. And at the same time, he led showdowns, stalls and TV series in Russian literature. Pelevin's style is extremely stingy, and even the fact that the main narrator exists simultaneously in two worlds and the action is often transferred to the psychedelic worlds of the inhabitants of a mental hospital doesn't force the author to resort to literary games and stylizations. Often the style of the novel resembles a police protocol, however richly decorated with jokes, hidden quotes ranging from Demyan Bedny to ancient Buddha texts, philosophical reasoning and Pelevin's side-nature punches. The points of the highest tension in the novel are not connected with sharp plot twists. There are dialogues, an exchange of remarks between simple Pyotr and the more wise and open-minded companions, revealing to him the true essence of being. One can argue about which of the time layers of the book is real for the main character, but the time of the creation of the novel itself is unmistakably recognizable. This is the era of criminals and stalls, vodka absolute, and the burning White House. Recognizable signs of the 90s penetrate the text through free inserted novellas, descriptions of the obsessive delirium of Pyotr Pustota's roommates. In the end of the book, Pyotr himself ends up in the bar, where he reads a poem from the stage and shoots at the lamp, just as it happens at the beginning of the novel, in the same place from other time. In both time layers, looking into the whole, Pyotr remarks, the audience was the most diverse, but most of all, as usually happens in the history of mankind, big-faced speculators and expensively dressed. Eternal return, as it was said. Pyotr reproduces his own roads, actions and impressions in Moscow of 1918 and 1990s. Both eras for Pelevin are the time after the catastrophe, the kingdom of chaos, the triumph of the darkest sides of the human soul. Why, I thought, why any social cataclysm in the world leads to the fact that this dark rednecks pops up and makes everyone else live according to their vile and conspirational laws. Pelevin rejects this criminal world, but at the same time he is fascinated by it. Simple Maria and Schwarzenegger attacking the Ostankino Tower, or criminals talking in bandit slang about conscience and eternal bliss, it is vulgar. But as often happens, there is a lot of energy in this vulgarity. The chaos and destruction of the 1990s for Pelevin are not the same as for a patriotic journalist. They are not associated with a geopolitical catastrophe, the collapse of the empire, or the Soviet way of life. For Pelevin, such categories are not relevant. In his 1993 essay, John Fowles and the Tragedy of Russian Liberalism, Pelevin openly speaks about what is destroyed in the 90s, the possibility of a life based on self-deepening and the search for truth that is not subject to the invisible hand of the market. Russia of the recent past was a huge surrealistic monastery, whose habitants were not faced with the problem of social survival, but with eternal spiritual questions, posed in an ugly parodic form. Soviet world lived its life out very far from normal life, but not far from God, whose presence it did not notice. Now this non-functional appendix of the Soviet soul turned out to be an unaffordable luxury. It's not the state of ideology that was destroyed, but the very possibility of existing, not accepting the struggle for money or social status as the goal of life. In relation to the 90s, Pelevin is equally far from patriots and liberals. He chooses the guys from Tverskoy Boulevard whom Pyotr sees on his way to Chapayev's armored car. Some were with sleds, others with skates, and I automatically thought that while idiot adults are busy rebuilding the world they invented, children continue to live in reality, among snowy mountains and sunlight, on black mirrors of frozen lakes, and in the mystical silence of snowy, dark streets. The main line of the novel, the narrator's movement along the path of enlightenment, really looks like a retelling of some key provisions of Buddhism. Chapayev brings Pyotr to an understanding of the illusionary nature of the world in his own eye. These truths are logically inexplicable and comprehended through sudden insights that throw the mind out of the circle of familiar categories. Tibetan Cossacks, using the song "Oh, it's not evening, as an example, explain to Pyotr that the ordinary consciousness of a person is subject to uncontrollable passions and life is like a dream. We can even see a controversy between different Eastern traditions. Kotovsky, in a conversation with Pyotr, compares the inner essence of a person with wax, which is able to take on different forms. This is an echo of the Vedic doctrine of Atman, an unchanging divine essence that manifests itself in all human beings. For the Buddhist Chapayev, no Atman, self or soul exists, and that's why he takes Kotovsky to the Black Baron, Jungern, to explain what the mind is. Finally, heroes find the conditional river of absolute love, Ural, after using the clay machine gun, a mystical weapon that belongs to Chapayev, which turns into emptiness everything it is directed at. It opens up as a stream glowing with all the colors of the rainbow, which at the same time was the grace, happiness and love of infinite power. It can be traced back to the Buddhist legends about the rainbow body, the dissolution of the physical shell of beings who have reached full enlightenment, their instant transformation into a rainbow or a pillar of light. To escape, you need to know not where you are running, but from where. That's why it is necessary to constantly have your prison before your eyes. Seeing in Pelevin's novel a preaching or a lecture on the history of Buddhism is prevented by its fundamental flippancy. The presentation of any noble truths here is covered with a nice amount of irony. It was this joking intonation reaching the comparison of temple practice with the drug high, and soap opera heroes with the Virgin Mary, that caused the aggressive rejection of the novel by conservative critics. If Russian Buddhists used the practice of offended feelings, the author would be cancelled. On the other hand, even this postmodernist game can be interpreted as the Buddhist tradition of the Chan school, which practiced shocking actions and self-denial, up to the burning of sacred statues or the slogan "Kill the Buddha." As the critic Sergei Kuznetsov wrote, in Pelevin's book, the parody of esoteric knowledge serves as the best confirmation of its sacred value. "Oh, Pyotr," said Chapayev, "I explain to you, any form is emptiness. But what does it mean?" And that means that emptiness is any form. Chapayev quotes here the Heart Sutra of Perfect Wisdom and concentrated exposition of supreme wisdom attributed to the Bodhisattva Avalokiteshvara. Emptiness, absolute absence, and great nowhere is the only reality hidden under the cover of the world of ideas and sensual phenomena. It's the wisdom, gained not logically, but by intuition. That's what Chapayev is trying to explain to Pyotr. The first step to this comprehension is critical solipsism, the idea that the only true reality is the consciousness of the perceiver himself. Everything that we see is in our consciousness, says Chapayev, which means that our consciousness is somewhere. It's impossible, there is no such place about which one could say that we are located in it. Nobody, nowhere, nothing. There are the essentially correct answers to any question. The only real-time dimension is now, which is also eternity. Emptiness is also hidden behind sensual beauty, which arouses erotic lust. Good time to say that the dialogue between Pyotr and Anka with the discussion of the theses allows Pelevin to create one of the rare successful erotic scenes in Russian literature. These are forms about which one can only say that there is nothing that accepts them. Understand? Therefore, in fact, there is no wax or vodka. There is nothing, and even this no is not there either. Everything beautiful that can be in a person is inaccessible to others, because it's truly inaccessible even to the one in whom it is. Emptiness is both the surname of the protagonist of the novel and a description of his true nature, which he will have to realize leaving the insane asylum to freedom, literally having been discharged from the hospital, and also leaving the world of illusory sensual forms, having found themselves in nowhere while still alive. There is no time to escape, and he knows about it. Moreover, there is nowhere to run, and there is no way to this nowhere. But all this is nothing compared to the fact that the one who runs away is nowhere to be found. Pelevin chooses the ideal setting to explain the doctrine of emptiness. The post-revolutionary and post-perestroika years are the same time when any established ideas about reality and human life itself are questioned, hang in the void, seem unsteady and unreliable. As the critic Vyacheslav Kuritsyn wrote, for Pelevin, revolution and civil war turn out to be a chronotope, in which the substance of existence has become thinner to such an extent that emptiness easily shines through it, which turns out to be the last intention to the Russian literary tradition here.